Let's talk about whether owning cryptocurrency makes you a target for armed robbery, theft, home invasion, kidnapping, ransom, and all the evils of the world. The short take is the statistical probability is almost zero, but I want to walk through that statistical probability because I think it'll help you feel better, and I'll also give you a few tips on what you can do if you're worried about it, even if the statistical probability is almost zero. Okay, so in the United States, this is some quick stats I pulled off ChatGPT. But in the United States, there are about 100,000 armed robberies every year. 100,000 armed robberies. Now, specific to cryptocurrency, someone actually tries to keep up with every single instance where any of the bad things I mentioned, home invasions, armed robberies, kidnapping, ransom, anything like that, involves someone for their cryptocurrency. And that person is Jameson Lopp, who's the chief strategy officer, or actually chief security officer, maybe, I think, of Casa, which is a Bitcoin company. Anyway, so he keeps up. His Twitter handle is at Lopp, Lopp. So Lopp, Jameson Lopp. He keeps up with the stuff and he tweets it basically every time he ever finds anything anywhere in the world. Other countries have had more of an issue, but still statistically, it's almost zero. But anyway, so if there are 100,000 armed robberies in the United States, the total number of things I keep up with that Jameson Lopp posts is fewer than 10 in the United States in a given year. So we're talking about 10 versus 100,000, which means the probability of an armed robbery happening that was related to cryptocurrency is like 1 in 10,000 chance that it was related to cryptocurrency versus just it happened in general. So the short take is criminals are almost always targeting people because they can easily target the people. And it has nothing to do with cryptocurrency. The cryptocurrency, if people are targeting people for cryptocurrency, that is extremely infrequent. And again, we're dealing with, I think, to the best of my sort of off the top of my head count, is fewer than 10 instances per year versus armed robbery in the United States, which is like 100,000 a year. So you're dealing with statistical probabilities of 10,000 to 1 or something ridiculous like that. If you try to find statistics on home invasions and kidnappings and ransoms and things like that, the numbers end up getting so small that it's basically zero for in general. Those things are just extremely unlikely in the United States, regardless of whether cryptocurrencies are involved. So I would say, is this something the average person needs to worry about? No, but at the same point, there's a lot of things in life where I like to exercise extra caution, just because. So the number one thing, first of all, the likelihood that you're going to lose your Bitcoin to something that involves the use of force, armed robbery, home invasion, kidnapping, ransom, all that sort of stuff is basically zero compared to the likelihood that you're going to get scammed or hacked. So if you want to worry about something, you should worry about getting scammed or hacked, not that something, is going to somebody's going to assault you or, force you to hand over cryptocurrency. The statistical probability of that is just almost zero. And the best way to protect yourself against scamming and hacking is to buy a BitKey, bitkey.world, and keep your Bitcoin on BitKey. That is by far the best way to keep your Bitcoin out of the hands of scammers and hackers. If you want to take an additional step and get your Bitcoin out of the hands or out of reach of the other situations I'm talking about, by far the easiest way to do that is to just move your BitKey from, the jewelry, whatever, your jewelry box in your bedroom. Just move your BitKey to a safe deposit box at a bank. Safe deposit boxes at banks typically cost about $30 per year, not per month, per year. That's only $2.50 per month. And a safe deposit box at a bank, you can just rent the smallest one, keep your BitKey in there. That way, in the extremely statistically zero probability that you end up in a home invasion or something like that, you always want to be in a position that you can comply to the absolute best of your ability. And the best position to be in is complying to the best of your ability and not being able to do the thing they want you to do because it's physically impossible. So if somebody, beats down your door at 2 a.m. on a Saturday and says, "Give me all your money, all your jewelry and all your cryptocurrency," what you want to be able to tell them is, "Here's all my jewelry, here's all my money," whatever. Obviously, you want to comply to the best of your ability, but you want to say, "Hey, The problem is I can't give you my Bitcoin because it's in a safe deposit box at a bank and the bank is closed at 2 a.m. on a Saturday. I'm sorry. Like, I can't give you the Bitcoin even if I wanted to. That is the best way to get your Bitcoin. That further step, which again is statistically so insignificant probability that it would ever happen, that again, I even debate whether it's even worth doing videos on. But as the price of Bitcoin rises, especially if we get a big parabolic run towards the end of this year, there's going to a lot of people that are going to feel like they have so much Bitcoin that it makes them nervous. And so I want to sort of head that off by just one, highlighting just how extraordinarily improbable it is that something like this would happen. And if you ever do come across a news article that involves something horrible happening to somebody in the United States related to cryptocurrency, it's almost always there's more to the story. So, for example, there was a recent story where someone was kidnapped related to cryptocurrency, but what actually happened is the person was part of a scam ring. And as part of the scam ring, he and his buddies had scammed a bunch of people, and he had run off with the money. And then there was a kidnapping and extortion that was trying to get the money back from all of the scamming. So again, that's not going to happen to any of you because you're not running around scamming people. If you were running around scamming people, then I would say yes, you actually do have to worry about your safety because your, colleagues in crime are probably going to come after you. But you're not running around scamming people, so you don't have to worry about your other scammers. You don't have to worry about them hating you if you steal from them and they get mad at you. So almost always when there's stories, horrible stories about something happening, first of all, it's extremely, uncommon in the United States. But in the extremely rare case that it's not something like that happened, it's typically part of a organized crime ring to start with, which is very similar to the kind of crime that happens related to drugs. A huge amount of the crime that happens related to drugs is drug deals gone bad. So if you're worried about your safety and you look at statistics and you see that a certain city has a certain number of murders every year, the question is, yeah, but were those people participating in an activity that you're going to be participating in? If the answer is, well, a lot of those murders were drug deals that have gone bad, well, guess what? You're not participating in drug deals, which means you're not going to get shot in the process of a drug deal gone bad, which means that, the statistics that are related to things you are not doing don't apply to you. So the same is true in the world of cryptocurrency that not only is it statistically extremely unlikely that those things happen, but when they do happen, it typically involves the intersection of other crime that the person should not have been involved with at all to start with. And as a result, someone like you is not going to be in that position because you're not involved in cryptocurrency crime, and therefore the blowback of that crime is not something that applies to you. Right. If you want to protect your Bitcoin, the best way to do it is to buy a BitKey. And if you want to protect it even farther from home invasions and things like that, the easy thing to do is just keep your BitKey in a safe deposit box at a bank. That way, if somebody holds you up at gunpoint and says, "Get me all your Bitcoin," the ideal answer is, "I wish I could, but I can't because I need my BitKey to give you all my Bitcoin." And I promise you, bad guys do not want to go to a bank. Banks have cameras. Banks have armed security personnel. They have the magic little button they push that makes the police come immediately. Banks have all the sorts of security that bad guys don't want to mess with unless they're there to rob a bank, but that doesn't apply to you because, that's not something that applies to cryptocurrencies. So bad guys do not want to go to banks because of all the security. They want to rob people where it's easy, it's opportunistic. And again, that's somewhere between 1,000 times more likely and 10,000 times more likely to happen with nothing to do with cryptocurrency. It just happened to somebody as opposed to happening to somebody because they were targeted for cryptocurrency. That being said, things you can do: buy a BitKey, keep it in a safe deposit box in a bank. You can also don't tell anyone how much Bitcoin you have. Now, again, I fudge that principle a little bit because I talk about percentages of my net worth in Bitcoin, but I never talk about how much Bitcoin I have. And I've done entire videos about why I have less Bitcoin than people think I have. But regardless, and in my case, I take lots of extra precautions. I make it very, very difficult to get to my Bitcoin, even for me or my loved ones, if me or my loved ones were under duress or coercion. So I've thought through in my situation all the different scenarios of kidnappings and ransoms and extortion and home invasion and all of the different things. And I've tried to make my Bitcoin impossible to get in all of those situations, even by me, even if I want to, even by my family members, even if they want to. Because in any situation like that, again, it's extremely unlikely, not going to happen to you, not something you need to worry about. But in those situations, you want to be able to comply to the best of your ability and still not have the bad guys get your Bitcoin. So again, if I'm held up at gunpoint and somebody says, give me your Bitcoin, the answer is I can't. I like literally can't. Me getting access to my Bitcoin involves time delays, which are called time locks. It involves significant time delays. It involves geographic, separation, as in I can't even get to my Bitcoin if I wanted to right now. Like the ways, and I'm not going to go into all the details for security reasons, but even if I wanted to get my Bitcoin right now in large amounts, it would take a huge amount of time, a, a large number of different locations, none of which are close to where I typically am. It involves dogs, it involves armed security, it involves cameras, it involves every conceivable thing that a bad guy does not want to have to deal with. That is the gauntlet that I have set up to make it extremely difficult to get my Bitcoin, even for me. Because in a situation of duress or coercion, I want to make it almost impossible for me or my loved ones to get my Bitcoin, even if we wanted to, even if we were trying to comply with an attacker's demands. Plus, I love the movie Ransom, which is a Mel Gibson movie that came out a long time ago. And, back then, he did exactly what Coinbase did recently, which is a number of hackers demanded a $20 million ransom because they had stolen some customer information from Coinbase. And Coinbase told them no, and that instead of paying a $20 million ransom, they were instead putting a $20 million bounty on the heads of the people that stole the data for the arrest and conviction of those individuals. So I love that approach. And obviously, if I ever found myself in the similar situation, that is the approach I would take, which is to say, hey, however much money you're demanding, that is the bounty on your head. But nobody needs to be in that situation anyway. Nobody should be in that situation anyway. And nobody wants to have to deal with making decisions like that. So probabilities are, you're 10,000, somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 times more likely to be a victim of something bad happening that has nothing to do with your cryptocurrency than you are something related to your cryptocurrency. But the steps you can take, don't ever tell anybody how much Bitcoin you have. Like, don't tell them a number of Bitcoin or an amount of Bitcoin. Um, you know, other than that, store your Bitcoin on a BitKey. You know, if you have more than $10,000 of Bitcoin or whatever number is a big number to you, keep that BitKey in a safe deposit box at a bank where it's, no attacker is going to want to go with you to to a bank to get your BitKey to get your Bitcoin. Like, it's just not worth it for them. That's the ways you could protect yourself. Again, in my situation, I have an entire gauntlet that is much more complicated, much more difficult, and anticipates all of those bad things that I've mentioned in this video. But that is not necessary for the average person. The average person, get a BitKey, get your Bitcoin out of the hands of scammers and hackers. That solves 99.999% of your problem. And if you want to solve the other 0.001% of your problem, go get a $30 safe deposit box at a bank and keep your BitKey in there, and you're good. And you just don't have to worry about this stuff. So that helps. Again, especially anticipating a rise in the price of Bitcoin later this year. I want to get ahead of that and make you aware of all this stuff. And for the vast majority of people, you just don't have to worry about it. But there are common sense things you can do. And that's why I wanted to record this video. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks.